On December 5, 1872, a Canadian brigantine named the De Gratia was sailing 400 miles east of the Azores when crew members noticed a ship drifting in the distance. After attempts to contact the ship failed, the captain of the De Gratia decided to take a closer look. The crew of the De Gratia recognized the ship as the Mary Celeste, which departed weeks earlier and was already supposed to reach its destination in Italy. Upon this closer inspection, the ship, despite being in perfectly usable condition, was found to have no one on board. Further searching found the belongings of the ship's crew, the 1,700 barrels of cargo, and a 6-month supply of food all still on the ship, but not a single individual of the 10-person crew was anywhere to be seen. So what could have happened to them? Where could they have gone? Let's take a closer look into the mystery of the Mary Celeste to try and figure out what really could have happened to the 10 missing members of the crew. Over the years, theories ranging from a pirate invasion, a mutiny, or even an attack from a sea monster have been proposed. But the story of the ship begins all the way back in 1861, when it wasn't even named the Mary Celeste. In May of 1861, the Mary Celeste was called the Amazon, and it was used as a trading vessel. The bad luck of the ship begins all the way back at its start. On its first voyage, the Amazon had trouble initially setting sail, and the captain even contracted pneumonia and died as a result. Over the next few years, the ship went about its normal business until in 1867, the ship crashed ashore on Cape Breton Island, and the investors behind the ship weren't able to salvage it at the time. A man named Alexander McBean then acquired the ship and was able to pull it from the island. It was then sold to a man named John Howard Beatty, who sold it to another man named Richard W. Haynes. Haynes made numerous repairs to the ship and renamed it to the Mary Celeste, but it turned out that the thousands of dollars he put into the vessel had put him into some serious debt, and the ship was then confiscated by his creditors. It was eventually sold to a New York shipping company and placed under the command of Captain Benjamin Spooner Briggs. Briggs was known as an intelligent, well-respected sailor with over 18 years of experience, but it was under his command that the crew of the ship vanished without a trace. On November 7, 1872, the Mary Celeste set off from New York Harbor for Genoa, Italy. The ship was loaded with 1,701 barrels of denatured alcohol for delivery. The members of the ship consisted of Briggs, his wife, their 2-year-old daughter, and a crew of 7 men. Briggs was actually a part owner of the vessel as well, so he took much care in selecting these members of the crew and thought of them to be a great group. Less than a month after the Mary Celeste had sailed, a Canadian brigantine named the De Gratia, led by Captain David Morehouse, spotted it set at full sail 400 miles east of the Azores, a small set of islands in the mid-Atlantic. When the Mary Celeste failed to respond to attempted signals, 3 members of the De Gratia were dispatched aboard it, but upon reaching the ship, not a single member of the crew was still on board. The boat was still fully intact with all of its cargo and the crew's belongings still present. There didn't seem to be any signs of violence, and the only damage to the ship was minor enough that it shouldn't have caused any difficulty for the crew, like the 3.5 feet of water resting at the bottom of the ship. The only thing that seemed out of place on the ship was the one lifeboat, which was missing along with the navigation book, chronometer, and sextant. The ship's entry log was found in the mate's cabin and was dated for November 25th at 8 a.m., 10 days before it was found by the De Gratia. It stated that the ship was about 6 miles off the coast of Santa Maria, one of the islands in the Azores. Reports were logged on an hourly basis, so whatever happened to the Mary Celeste must have happened shortly thereafter. That would make it almost a week and a half that the Mary Celeste had been drifting on the ocean with absolutely no crew. According to the documents on the ship, it drifted over 700 kilometers in that time. The De Gratia then took the Mary Celeste to Gibraltar and explained their side of the story. The ship was then sold to new owners in a salvage trial. So what could have happened to the crew of the Mary Celeste? There are numerous theories as to what could have possibly happened to the crew, but we'll start by taking a look at the most popular and plausible. The first theory was that there was a mutiny. Due to the cargo of the ship being alcohol, when 9 of the barrels on board were actually found empty, the court in charge of the case suggested that the crew could have become drunk off the cargo and proceeded to not only kill Briggs and his family, but then also flee the ship. However, Briggs' reputation as a captain was nothing but fair and generous to his crew, so a mutiny wouldn't make much sense. Instead, the theory of pirates is a better solution. This theory gained popularity due to the fact that the crew seemingly abandoned the ship while it was in perfectly usable condition. The area the ship was traveling through was known to be a hotspot for pirates off the coast of Morocco. However, the fact that the entire cargo and the crew's belongings still remained on the ship didn't make much sense. If pirates had actually come into contact with the ship, then why didn't they take anything? This led some to believe that the pirates actually came from the de Gratia's crew. When the de Gratia arrived in Gibraltar, along with the Mary Celeste, some speculated that the de Gratia's crew was involved in something shady. The reason for this is linked to an old maritime law that states that any person who helps recover another person's ship or cargo is entitled to a reward. In addition, the captain of the de Gratia, Captain Morehouse, was friends with Captain Briggs. The two even had dinner together the night before the Mary Celeste began on its voyage. However, after a multi-month-long investigation, the court found no proof that this was the case. It is important to note though that the ship's insurer only paid out 1/6 of the payment the crew would normally receive for recovering the boat, meaning that the insurers were not fully convinced that the de Gratia's crew was innocent. Natural disasters were also a popular theory, specifically a waterspout or earthquake. The waterspout theory has been fairly popular due to the fact that 3.5 feet of water actually filled the bottom of the ship. While the ship didn't have a leak itself, and the water most likely came from above due to a wave or waterspout, faulty instruments on board could have led the crew to believe that there was a more serious problem with the ship. When the de Gratia crew initially boarded the Mary Celeste, they attempted to use the ship's sounding rod, an instrument used to see how much water is on board the ship. However, the Mary Celeste didn't have a proper sounding rod. Instead, the crew found a makeshift rod that was out of place. And so, after water filled up the ship, the improper rod could have led the crew to believe there was more water on board than there actually was and evacuated to the lifeboat instead. As for an earthquake, it's been confirmed that an earthquake capable of affecting the ship took place while it was at sea. It's even possible that this earthquake caused the 9 barrels of alcohol that were empty to leak, causing a panic. In fact, the 9 barrels of alcohol that were empty were made from red oak, which is weaker than the white oak the others were made from. So even if it wasn't from the earthquake exactly, the 9 empty barrels have a decent chance of being involved in some way. In 2006, Dr. Andrea Sella created a replica of the Mary Celeste cargo hold and used butane gas to simulate an explosion similar to what could have happened on the ship. He swapped out the barrels for paper cubes to try and see if an explosion could have been the cause. When the gas was lit on fire, a large flame arose. However, the paper cubes did not receive any sort of scorching or burning. This proposed a new theory that the leaking barrels made from the weaker oak wood caused a gas explosion capable of causing the crew to rush aboard the lifeboat without actually leaving much of a trace of the explosion itself. As interesting and plausible as this theory is, it wouldn't make much sense that after rushing to the lifeboat and realizing that the ship was not actually going to explode, the crew didn't go back to the Mary Celeste. Of course, it was found set at full sail, so perhaps by the time they realized the ship was okay, it was too late. The last plausible theory was proposed in a 2007 documentary, The True Story of the Mary Celeste. In the Smithsonian documentary, a team led by Anne McGregor showed a fair bit of evidence that the Mary Celeste could actually have been lost. Using models, it was shown that the Mary Celeste was around 120 miles off course when it was abandoned. However, due to their faulty tools on board, they thought that they were much closer to land. Perhaps the crew abandoned the ship in a panic, believing that they could reach land on the lifeboat, before realizing that they were much further away than they anticipated. Although this theory brings new evidence to the table, in the end it still remains just a theory, and it still seems unclear as to why an experienced captain would give the call to abandon ship, an action usually reserved as a last resort when the ship is surely to go down. Of course, there are always the theories that the ship was abandoned due to aliens or a sea monster, but it seems strange that the crew would leave a large ship for a lifeboat under those circumstances. So I think we can rule those out for now. As for any evidence of the crew and lifeboat being found, the only possible lead was a couple of fishermen finding what appeared to be 2 makeshift rafts off the coast of Spain. One of the rafts even had an American flag attached to it, but whether or not this is the final resting place of the Mary Celeste crew was never confirmed. It seems like we may never know what truly happened to the crew of the Mary Celeste, but it certainly seems like there is more to this mystery that we still have yet to uncover. Thank you guys so much for making it to the end of the video and taking a look into this mysterious case with me. If you enjoyed, please consider subscribing or checking out the other mysteries I've covered. If you'd like to see me show a mystery on this channel, please join my Discord or comment it down below. Thanks again and have a good night.